HD Life FM. James here with you. Hope you're having a fantastic evening. It is my pleasure to be here with a very special guest. We got our days a bit mixed up, so it's a real surprise to have you here, but I'm so thrilled that you're here. The wonderful, no stranger to HD audiences, the wonderful Anneliese Pittman.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
Hello, everyone.
It's great to have you here. Probably the last that some people may have been aware of you was when you came in to do a whole bunch of HD shows, but you did this amazing podcast called After Graduation, which ended up being an award-winning podcast as well at the awards. How was that moment for you? Because we have our big HD radio and podcasting awards at the end of every year. Your podcast After Graduation was up for most creative podcast of the year, and you won.
I did win. I mean, honestly, I wasn't expecting it. I've never been nominated for that category before. And I guess, you know how you do that really amazing clip when you show all the other candidates?
Yeah.
I was sort of sitting there and I was like, oh, like, is mine like that creative? Like, is that the adjective I'd use for it of all things? But no, like that feeling, I was just in shock. Like I sort of looked around, I was with my mum and I was like, oh my gosh, like my name was just called. And as I was walking up, I sort of came to the realization that, oh, I have to make an acceptance speech as well. And I haven't pre-planned anything, but, you know, being the radio professional, I just sort of went up there, gave a bit of a spiel, but I think it was great. So I sort of tried not to think too hard and I made sure to keep moving my eyes through the audience so I wasn't just death staring one person.
Yeah. So
it was, you know, a few.
That's the classic presentation mode thing. Did you end up having to do quite a lot of speeches like for school and stuff like that? Is that something that you had to do a lot of? Because some people find themselves in that spot and some people don't.
Yeah, I know. Honestly, I didn't really do any leadership things. I mean, sometimes I'd read out prayers or took more of like a speaking role, say in MSOL or Game Changers programs. But other than that...
So for people who don't know, that's kind of the ministry programs at Sacred Heart College where you were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So unless I guess, put myself forward for not really, but I'm fine with public speaking. I did debating.
Of course
many
you did.
years,
That's right. And you won the big final.
Yeah, back-to-back champions.
Which means that you presented, you did your final debate was it at Parliament House?
Parliament House.
What was that like?
Honestly, really physically uncomfortable because...
Why?
I mean, I was in year 9 because the first year we were in the grand final couldn't happen due to COVID. So it was limited to the one time. And the seats are really far away from the bench. So there's photos of like me and the other girls in my debating team hunched over fully, like reaching across this, you know, vast space, trying to obviously write down our notes. But oh my gosh,
because that is such a thing. That's such a thing when you're debating, is you're constantly writing notes for rebuttals,
writing more rebuttals,
passing them to the next speakers and stuff.
And it was just so uncomfortable. I was like, felt like my body was being like stretched in half, trying to make it across from the seat to the bench. I would have been better off just, you know, standing, hunching over. So
you didn't really get too caught up on the fact of going, oh, wow, we're in Parliament House. This is where the big democratic arguments take place. You're like, no, the bench is too far away, man.
Really far away. Really impractical.
Right. We've got lots to chat about. I want to do like a big HD retrospective with you today because it's been such a big part of, well, you've been doing this since you were in primary school, man. So this is pretty wild. We've also got music from Sigrid, Pinyao, Coldplay and Taya, but right now this is brand new from David Guetta. You are listening to HD on Life FM. That is David Guetta. You are listening to HD on Life FM. We've got Anneliese, Sigrid and Pinyao and Coldplay up very, very shortly. The wonderful Anneliese Pittman is my very special guest here on the show, chatting about all things big HD retrospective. I'd love to start with. Could we go all the way back to the very, very beginning? So this is back at the school, I guess, formerly known as Sacred Heart what is now Sacred Heart Middle, but it's formerly known as Marymount, which was the all-girls version of the school, because it used to be like the middle school used to be an all-girls school and the other middle was an all-boys school. You were at Marymount and you first started doing ArchD back then, I think in year 7?
Year 6.
Year 6.
2018.
Right. Talk to me about that very first day. Do you remember that first day?
I do, very clearly.
Do you? What do you remember about that?
I was very, very excited. I'm not sure if I got the opportunity because I was class captain and whether it was offered, I guess, to the leadership team at that time, or if it was just because, I don't know, I'd done something and they'd taken notice. I'm like, oh, Anneliese, you might like this. But there were only a handful of us selected in 2 groups, I believe, for 2 recording sessions. And I was just stoked. It just seems like this absolutely incredible thing. Like, you get to be on radio. And when you're that young, that just seems like the most awesome thing ever. And, I had a few friends that I had that were doing it as well. But I remember listening back to the recordings and just almost getting secondhand embarrassment, if that makes sense. I think it's that first time where you're hearing your own voice through a recording, yeah. I guess. And hindsight can sometimes be a terrible thing because you're scrutinizing everything you thought you could have said differently or what you didn't like that you said. And I guess that experience was sort of my first taste for it. I feel like I just went on and on and on about like a broken arm story. I think there was the story about a healthy canteen. I think it was like times you've injured yourself, a healthy canteen,
yep.
and then something to do with pets.
It could well have been. It could well have been. And if I remember rightly, this was back in the day when we were only doing radio, wasn't it? Podcasting wasn't a thing at this point.
It was a one-take, one-hit wonder.
Righto. And you clearly came back for more.
Yeah.
So when you walked away from that and you actually got over that secondhand embarrassment or that weird uncanny valley thing that you get when you actually hear your own voice, and it sounds like your own voice but not really, and it's kind of a little bit, it's like if my voice was cringy it would sound like this. It takes a little while to get over that, it is a little bit weird, but you came back. Why did you come back for another go?
I did. Well, I think the next time everything happened, it was in year 9 because I guess COVID had taken a bit of a hit. It was a bit hard to get things going.
Yeah, right.
At that point, I think ArchD was only doing things for specific classes.
Yeah.
So say if you were doing, I don't know, year 9 journalism, you might get the opportunity to do something, but it wasn't really, open to all to just take the floor. Mm-hmm. But in year 9, there was an opportunity, and I think students could miss a day of classes, I think, to do a big podcasting workshop, and it was to get your level 1 ArchD badge, I believe.
Because I remember, I'm just remembering this now, and what happened was I remember... Because there was that break and I forgot that was for COVID. And then I came into the school and I think the first session was after school. And
yes.
I was there and Miss Barile, the teacher, was there and introducing me to everybody and saying, some of these people you might know, some of these people you might not know. And I sort of looked around the class and I'm like, oh, vaguely familiar, some of these guys. And sort of went through. And then she said, your name. And I had to go back and rescan going, really? She's here? And then I sort of did, and then saw I kind of had to like age you because you had gotten so much taller. Because back when you were in year 6, I hope you don't mind me saying but you were actually quite short.
I was, I looked probably about 5. I was I didn't even look like a 12-year-old. I was probably about at least 4 years younger in terms of appearance. And
your voice had changed too because your voice was very high as well.
Yes.
And so that was also another part of it. But you guys did this great podcast. Was it about cracking the teenager's code? That's it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Give people a bit of an idea about what that was about because that was such a great episode.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it was sort of, you can take the floor. This podcast can be whatever you want it to be about. And there were a few other year 9 girls that I did it with. And we sort of thought, what's a shared experience we've all had? COVID. Mm-hmm. And also, I guess the aim sort of was to share what our experience was like being a teenager during COVID because at that point, there were a lot of studies coming out about what mental health impact it had had on teenagers, what educational impact it had had on teenagers. So I guess we just sort of thought, hey, it's a very shared experience. And we thought it would be pretty interesting, I guess, to shed light on. But, it was great fun getting to work collaboratively, trying out podcasting for the first time. That was my first sort of experience with it, but creating the cover art, working on a script, collaborating with everyone, working out who's interviewing, who's answering questions. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a great experience. And I guess sort of it's still only very much the beginning for you in terms of podcasting, because you then went on to do so many other things. There's one in particular we do need to talk about, because it was, for me also, I don't think we've even really talked about it, but it was this kind of like very first podcast of its kind that we actually made with ArchD, and you were the one that made it. And it all revolved around, let's just say, parents not being 100% honest with you about something really, really massive that you only ended up finding out at the very, very last moment. We've also got music from Taya, Galantis, Heather Fran, and more. But right now, this is brand new from Anika. You are listening to ArchD on Life FM. That is Sigrid. You are listening to ArchD on Life FM. Pinyao and Coldplay on the way very shortly. Anneliese Pittman is my very special guest. Multiple ArchD award winner, old scholar of Sacred Heart College, and extremely experienced podcaster. We were talking about a particular podcast that you made that was really very much the first of its kind. Can you talk a little bit about the podcast that you made, which ended up being called The Baby Sister Conspiracy? What was it about?
So, I honestly want to go right back to when you sort of reached out to me about it. I think we'd done a Youth Leaders Day here at the Catholic Education offices, and there was sort of this challenge, because for those of you that haven't been to one, every year, James sort of comes up with this big challenge that centers around, radio, podcasting, and it's sort of like a little bit quirky. You never know what it's going to be until you show up. And this year was the year that I think we had to write, I guess, a story, but every time something would change or you thought it had to think quickly on your toes. And I guess I'd sort of written this crazy story about a turkey and a lunch, and I guess you sort of picked it out and you were like, wow, I guess this is actually really good. Yeah, well,
it was more than just me, because we had a bunch of other sort of like radio podcasty people in that day as well. And I think the challenge was, if I remember rightly, all of the podcasting leaders from around all of the Catholic schools had come in. And I think you had to pick up a story. Someone wrote a bit and then you had to pass it on to another person. Like like that game, like party game, right? And we all sat down and we had to, it was the very first time we'd ever done anything like this. So we weren't sure what we were doing really.
Yeah.
And we all sat down over lunch and looked at all of the different stories. I had to sort of like judge the team that did the best, in terms of that. And we all sat down and read them all through. And there was a lot of great ones there, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, the creativity.
It was wild. But when we got to yours, we were like, oh, come on. Like, all of us, even some of them who were there as well. We had this lady there as well who'd gone and done like the Transom workshop over in the US. Like, she was super, super experienced. Even she looked at that and she just went, the quality of this writing is insane. And so that sort of led, I think, because we knew that for the next day, the next Podcasting Leaders Day, by some miracle, and I have no idea how it happened, we were reaching out. Sorry, I'm going into so much backstory now. This is crazy. So
the lore is unlocked.
The lore is unlocked, and it's like we're going deep diving into Wikipedia links, deeper down as we go. But Michaela was working with us at ArchD at the time, and we had said, who do we want? If we could choose anybody to be a special guest for Podcasting Leaders Day, who would it be? And let's just go totally for broke, right? Whoever. So we had this list of top 5 people that we ended up whittling down. And I think we had Hamish and Andy on there. We had a whole bunch of other people on there as well. And we had a few arguments about who we thought should be on the list. But there was no question in our minds who the number one person was that we wanted Ira Glass, who basically had invented narrative podcasting, who everyone who does this looks at as the great sort of hero, the great sort of like the great innovator, the architect, if you will, right? And everyone pretty much on the list that we had as our must-gets all said no. None of them even replied. Except for him, who said, absolutely, sure. And I remember coming to work the following day and I said to Michaela, I got an email back from Ira Glass. She goes, oh, really? What did he say? I said, he said yes. And she burst into tears. She was like, really? I can't believe it. That's wild. So what came from that is that he then said, I'll come and do some advice and that's fine. But what would be even more fun would be if students like created podcasts and they submitted it and I gave them feedback. And I was like, I can't believe this is absolutely mad and crazy. So that's really what prompted me to get in touch with you to say, okay, so we really do now have to submit like the best possible stuff that we possibly can for feedback. So that's when I approached you. And that's when you came up with the baby sister conspiracy. So big aside. So talk now about what the idea behind the story of the baby sister conspiracy was.
So I think your prompt to me was, I guess, something that has this big twist that has sort of happened in your life. And I was so excited by the opportunity. It was such a big thing to me that I was like, oh my gosh, this has to be like the best, most twisty thing that's ever happened to me ever. Yeah. And I remember just sitting down with my mum for hours and I was like, what have I been through in my 15, 16 years of life at this point that has had the most ginormous dramatic twist ever? I was like writing things down, scrunching it up, throwing it out. I was almost catatonic trying to think of something that would be good. I was feeling the pressure and I sort of went back, racked my memory and I came up with something. So
great. And I tell you what, let's talk about that straight after this song. Just because we're talking for a long time and that's really wonderful. So we got to get onto what it was ended up being about. We've got music now from so much coming up. Galantis, Heather Fran and heaps more. But right now, this is Pinyao and Coldplay. You are listening to HD on Life FM. That is Pinyao and Coldplay. You are listening to HD on Life FM. Taya and Galantis on the way very shortly. Anneliese Pittman is my very special guest here this evening. And I just totally cliffhangered you. I just totally did a Netflix end of season thing now. But you don't have to wait 2 years. You just had to wait one song. So you had a big sort of like conversation with your mum trying to work out what the best idea for the story was. And you settled on something that was just spun gold. Talk a little bit about the story that you ended up settling on.
Okay, so the baby sister conspiracy?
The baby sister conspiracy, yeah.
And so for context, I have 2 younger brothers. I do not have a sister, but I was about 5 years old when my youngest sibling was to be born. Mm-hmm. And the entire pregnancy, I was set on it being a girl. I had a brother. He was okay, but he was okay. He was okay, but I just craved a sister so badly. And my parents, knowing how set I was on having a sister, when they found out at the 12-week anatomy scan that Noah was in fact a boy, decided to keep it from me for the entire pregnancy. They got the entire family on board, also ensuring that they did not tell me. And right until the very end, when he was born, did they actually have to break the news that unfortunately he was not a sister, he was a brother.
Yes.
And it broke my heart. You know, my great aunt was involved. My grandparents were involved. Like mum and dad, like they made the conscious decision to keep it from me. The betrayal for a little 5-year-old girl.
The story is, it's a remarkable story and the way that you tell it is brilliant. And you can hear the whole podcast. I mean, I just want to, in every social media or the podcast thing, we'll put it in like the show notes and stuff like that for people to actually hear it. Because I remember at the time, the thing that was really interesting to me was it was the very first ever, it was the very first level 3, what we call the level 3 podcast that was ever made for ArchD. And I couldn't help but go away from that and just go, oh, wow. Like, clearly... it was a terrible thing to think because I went, clearly I'm really good at teaching this. Like, clearly, like, because this is such a knockout podcast. And I remember Ira's feedback. Ira, listen to me. His feedback was just, he just was so like blown away by it. I mean, do you remember some of the comments that he said about it?
I just remember like, oh my gosh, there's pretty much no critiques. Like, surely there was, something wrong with it that Ira would notice and sort of pick out and give me advice on. I was just shell-shocked. I was like, what do you mean? Like, he thought it was really, really good.
I do remember that, listening to him go through it and then waiting for the but to happen.
Yeah, so was I.
Because he can be, I've seen him like give like on videos and stuff like that to people who are like masters of journalism. Yeah. He is savage, really savage.
Really savage. And even other podcasters had gone before me and they've gotten amazing notes like for them to do, and I was sort of waiting for mine, pen and paper at the ready. I was like, is that coming?
Yep.
I'm not hearing a but.
But yeah, I mean, it was just such a stunning piece of work in the end. So I definitely recommend people to check it out. It's really, really cool. We've got lots coming up, music from Heather Fran and Holvey. But right now, this is Taya. You are listening to ArchD on Life FM. That's Galantis. You are listening to ArchD on Life FM. We've got Holvey, Heather Fran on the way very shortly. Anneliese Pittman is our very special guest here on ArchD this evening. Now, another podcast that you made at the end of last year, we were talking about this before, it ended up winning the award for Most Creative Podcast at the awards last year, was called After Graduation. And it really came about when you were going to be doing what was previously called Research Project. It's now called AIF. You made the podcast as your AIF assignment. And it really centered around the fact that you had decided very, very early on in your life, around year 9, I think it was, that you wanted to be a speech pathologist. And so, spoiler warning, but you have actually now got into speech pathology.
Yes.
And so when does this all begin for you?
It all begins... Well, I think I have O Week, so there's a session for all the allied health degrees, I think on the 27th of February, and then the semester starts on the 3rd of March.
Righto. What was that moment like after all of this build? I mean, this is not just something that you've been wanting to do. You've now built podcasts around
it.
The idea that you want to be a speech pathologist. Tell me about that moment when you found out that you were actually accepted into it.
I mean, well, first of all, there are so many days post finishing year 12 that have so much tension and anxiety built around them. And many people have them written down in calendars. There's reminders constantly. And I'd say it would have to be the day ATARs come out, maybe the day university offers a due, and maybe when you actually find out whether you've been accepted or not for offer round.
Mm-hmm. So we do need to know, because the question that's going to be in everyone's mind is, so the ATAR did come out, what was it?
It did. So it came out in December and I was at my grandpa's house, and I believe they were supposed to come out at something around 9 a.m. or maybe 8:30. And I was just a nervous ball of energy. I did not sleep. It was honestly a nightmare. I was like really catastrophizing. I was like, if it's anywhere in this range, that should be fine.
Yep.
I was honestly trying to gaslight myself into that it would be okay. And I was putting all of this pressure, I guess, on it. And then I was telling myself, you couldn't have done any more, Anneliese. That was the best you could have done. And I decided to check it early at 8 a.m. just thinking, I don't know, maybe it'll be there. It was there.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a camera set up for my reaction or anything, because it was, half an hour to an hour early.
Yep.
I was just checking it just in case. And the result was just there on the screen. So raw, it was a 94.45, and then scaled, it was a 97.55.
Okay, so that's crazy. So that really does mean that pretty much any options are open to you,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
at
That doesn't
that
close the door
point.
on anything. But at that moment, did you think it's going to be okay? I'm going to get in and that's going to be all right? Or was it
Yeah.
still in doubt?
No, I was pretty sure because thankfully the University of Adelaide, which was who I sort of wanted to do speech pathology with, they have a guaranteed ATAR, and that was 95 with your selection rank, which is that highest scaled mark you get. So my 97.55 made sure I was definitely locked in, ready to go. There was sort of no doubts about it. So getting the official offer was really exciting, but I was just really excited to start the enrollment process, try and get that student ID card, actually do your subjects and pick your timetable. So it was amazing. I was able to pick a 4-day weekend for myself. So I only go into uni in semester 1 on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then in semester 2, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So
Righto. What's the thing that
Living the
what's the thing you're most looking forward to though? Because uni life is such an interesting thing, and Adelaide as well, because it really is a kind of like a miniature society, a miniature city in itself. And there's so much to do and so much to see. Like for you, like what is the thing you're most looking forward to on day one?
That's tough because I did extension studies. So I was doing university in year 12 with Flinders with a few topics. So I sort of got a little bit of a taste as to what the different structure would be like. But honestly, maybe it might be the social aspect.
Yep.
Because Adelaide has this amazing thing called the UX Club. So it's $30 per year and you get invited to all of these social events. Sometimes you might get food, all sorts of things. So there's been a lot of advice that I've gotten about going into uni, and everyone has said go to almost every social thing you can in first year and try and make the most friends as possible and really make the most out of the experience. So I'd say that would probably be the thing I'm most excited for.
And I also hear too that the University Debating Club at the University of Adelaide is also a very big thing. If you still want to go back and relive your former glory.
I could.
You could?
I could.
Yeah, you're not convincing me.
For
But those who are actually watching on the video podcast, that was a look of like, yeah, complete sincerity. Absolutely. Anneliese, thank you so much for coming in and doing the show
That's
today. It's so
okay.
good to see you. Please come back again and
I
keep us
will.
updated with how things are going during the course of the year. And that would be great. That'd be lovely. We are here every Wednesday night from 9, every Saturday night from 10. Stay tuned to Life FM for more of your music. Please check us out on either the regular podcast or now the video podcast on YouTube.
Very
now you can check it
exciting.
out again and you can see Annaliese's insincere look about wanting to do debating at university for real in real time as we go along. Anneliese, thanks so much. And we'll see you again in a few days, everyone.
See you again.